Good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Burns. I'm the District Superintendent at St. Lawrence Lewis BOCES. My job is pretty straightforward: to welcome you all here to the regional graduation measures in New York State. They're holding a series of these meetings around the state. And I have to tell you, there's a buzz about the North Country meeting. I've heard from my colleagues statewide. We're the only region in the entire state having the event at a pub and grill. And there are people all across the state that are envious of us. And I have to tell you, it's local tradition that the host district superintendent at events like this, Dale Brielle, buys the first round of drinks after the event is over. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly walk you through the agenda. We're going to have some introductions. We did just hear from our Regent, Beverly Ouderkirk. She was in Moira, so she'll be here in a few minutes. You'll hear from her. We do have a video from our Chancellor, Betty Rosa. Later, Dale Brielle will do a presentation on the current graduation measures in New York State. And then we're going to break you all into tables, and we've actually assigned you to different tables to respond to some questions. And this is what the State Ed Department is really interested in getting stakeholder feedback from a diverse group of individuals, not only in this region, but again, across the state. Chancellor Rosa kicked this process off. It will be about, more than a 2-year process by the time it is concluded. There is a blue ribbon commission, consultants, et cetera, assisting the State Ed Department with this because we know it's a big lift. I'm not going to read to you, but I'm going to just allow you to kind of look that over. Okay, and I think Mr. Brielle is going to cue up the video. So the first thing, again, we'll hear remarks from the Chancellor, and then we'll move into the presentation.
Hello, I'm Betty Rosa, Chancellor of the New York State Board of Regents. Thank you for being here today. The Board of Regents has embarked on an important review of New York State's high school graduation measures to reaffirm what it means to obtain a diploma in New York State. This is some of the most important work that the Board of Regents and the State Education Department can do for our children. Our priority is to ensure that all students have equitable access to high-quality education and opportunities. We know the current system isn't working for everyone. To help address this, the Board of Regents will form a Blue Ribbon Commission later this year. The commission will examine what a state diploma should signify. But before the commission can begin its review, we must first do our homework. We are holding regional meetings like this one to gather feedback from every corner in the state. And that is where we need your help. We would like you to consider what additional measures of learning and achievement would better serve New York's diverse student population as indicators on whether they are ready for career, college, and civic engagement. We have developed 5 key questions to help guide you in your discussion. Today's meeting is designed to foster a dialogue about this important topic so that by the end of the meeting, we have collected feedback from all of you. We're also taking the time to look at this across the nation and internationally. That work is underway now. The Board of Regents will consider possible policy alternatives only after the groundwork has been completed We know this work cannot be done overnight, and we will ensure that there is ample time for the Commission to effectively carry out this work. Let me be clear, this effort is not simply about changing our graduation standards. Rather, it's about providing different avenues, equally rigorous, for students to demonstrate that they are ready to graduate with a meaningful diploma. I look forward to receiving your valuable input throughout this process. Thank you for giving your time and consideration for the future of New York's children.
Okay, and again, this is a lengthier slide, so again, take a couple of minutes to consider it. But this one really just outlines, again, the Board of Regents' priorities, and they're really focused on two things here: equity, ensuring, because we know we have gaps when we look at our performance measures across the state. So focusing on equity for all of the students to have those equal opportunities. And then engagement. And the last piece talks about being prepared for a 21st century workforce and college and career readiness and what that should look like. I was neglectful in starting as well. I failed to introduce Dr. Leslie Myers-Small, who is here from the New York State Education Department, newly minted assistant commissioner with the department. She was a superintendent for many years. Was active in the Council of School Superintendents around the state. So thanks for joining us, Leslie. Ready to work up your thirst for later?
You got it.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dale Brielt. I'm the District Superintendent of the Franklin-Essex-Hamilton BOCES. I had to think about that for a second. I've only been on the job for a few weeks. Again, as Tom said, the host district superintendent draws the short straw here and has to buy drinks. I don't know about that one, but we were very honored to be able to help put this evening together for you. I know many of you in the room, and many of you know me and know that it's not typically my style to read to you, but this evening I'm going to read to you because it was very important that the department get the same information out to each legislative district where we are doing these sessions. So there are several slides that I'm going to take you through which talk about, again, why we're here, what our current graduation requirements environment looks like, what some considerations should be as we have our conversations this evening, what some other states are potentially looking at and doing, and all with the with the thought of generating and stimulating some of your thought in the conversations that you're going to have later this evening. Once I'm done with the informational session, I'll give a quick overview of how the rest of the evening is going to go, and I'll act as your MC and timekeeper, and if you need cheese, I'll go grab some for you as well. So with that said, I'm going to pick the presentation up and just talk about, as Chancellor Rosa mentioned, there will be a blue ribbon commission that will undertake this work moving forward to really reaffirm what a New York State high school diploma means. And the reasons we're doing this, the purpose of the commission, again, reconsider current diploma requirements to ensure that all students have access to multiple graduation measures, and we also are structuring this to ensure that there's adequate time for the field to enact any transition or any changes that are ultimately recommended. We have so many educators and leaders in the room, and we know that that's the most crucial thing. If we try to push things too quickly, oftentimes they fail because people feel overwhelmed and don't feel that they have enough resources to put the transition into place. Let me get that off of the screen. Okay. Hang on a second, I have a technical difficulty. So taking a quick look at the timeline, there's going to be a couple phases to the work. We're currently in phase 1, which is information gathering and learning, and that's why all of you are here this evening. We want to gather the feedback on 5 guiding questions, and the feedback will be forwarded to the Blue Ribbon Commission to assist them in their work. As part of Phase 1, SED is also looking at research and practices from other states to help inform the decision making. Phase 3, Phase 2 is the Blue Ribbon Commission when they meet and they help to develop recommendations. And then Phase 3 will be when the Commission's work and recommendations are presented to the Board of Regents, and the Board of Regents will ultimately work on their policy discussions and determine whether they are going to enact new policies. So here's a draft timeline for the Commission to carry out its work. Regional meetings like this one will continue through April, and the feedback from these meetings will be compiled and presented to the Board of Regents this summer. The Blue Ribbon Commission will first convene in the fall of 2020 and will carry out its work over the following year. The work will include forming subgroups for priority areas. And it's expected that the Commission will present its work to the Board of Regents in the winter of 2022. The Commission work will be completed in approximately 2 years, and this is by design so that ample stakeholder and public feedback can be part of the process. That's why we're here tonight. Phase 1, regional meetings in each judicial district. So each judicial district is hosting one meeting, and that's why Regent Ouderkirk will be here later this evening, because this is part of her judicial district. She's had to travel all over the place. She was down in Saratoga just last week. So starting between January and April of 2020, these meetings will be held. There'll be an outreach to a vast array of regional stakeholders, which is why you're all here. The format of the meetings will provide for discussions in a concise and consistent and thoughtful way. That's why, again, I'm reading to you this evening. Ideas and information will be captured in each regional area. And I think that's important, that the Commission see the differences that may pop up as we travel from region to region of our vast state. The task before us tonight is to provide the department with feedback on graduation requirements for New York State, and the feedback will be compiled into a report presented to the Board of Regents in the spring of 2020. So before we have you start your discussion, we do feel it's important that we provide you with an overview of current New York State diploma requirements. Now you may say, in a room full of educators, why are we doing this? We all know this. I can speak from significant experience that some of our folks in our buildings who should know this the best still struggle with this, because it's been a very positive move in New York State to have many different pathways towards attaining a graduation or toward a graduation credential. It also can get very confusing very quickly. So I think an overview is in order to learn about how students can earn a graduation credential in this state. So to earn a diploma in New York State, students must meet credit and assessment requirements, 2 different things. They have to have certain credits and certain assessments. These requirements are separate and distinct and do not have to happen simultaneously. The credit distribution table shows that there's a minimum number of credits required for each discipline. It's also important to note that disciplines students choose for the courses that they want to take to fulfill the minimal requirements, and they choose those themselves. For example, in science, some students take biochemistry and earth science, while others take environmental science, forensics, and physics. Any high school level science course can count towards the 3 required credits. There are a few required courses that everyone has to take. For example, all students must take a half a credit in health, and they have to take all of the credits in social studies that are prescribed. 2 credits in global history and geography, 1 credit in U.S. history, and a half credit in participation in government, and a half credit in economics. So again, we have choice in some areas, while in other areas we have pretty specific prescriptions. Now, when we take a look at our assessments, so we're moving away from credits that are required, now talking about assessments, we now have our multiple pathways scenario that we've been working with for the last several years. So it's a 4+1, where all students have to pass at least 1 assessment in English, math, science, and social studies, plus 1 additional pathway exam or 1 additional exam in an additional pathway. So not all pathways are created equal, in a sense that each pathway has a different requirement. So let's talk about those. So again, I think most of you know we have our English, math, science, and social studies regents in our various disciplines, but the pathways can all be a little bit different. So for example, if we were looking at the STEM pathway, you have to attain a passing score on one additional Regents exam or department-approved alternative in either mathematics or science. So one additional exam in math or science to attain a STEM pathway. Humanities requires an additional exam in English or social studies. In the arts, the only way you can attain an arts pathway right now is to earn a department-approved pathway exam in the arts, and that currently means either an AP Arts exam or an International Baccalaureate Arts exam, which most of our school districts, at least in this region, probably are not doing those. We may have a few. Languages other than English, the LOTE pathway. Students must earn a passing score on a department-approved pathway exam in a language other than English. So usually means the student has to complete 3 courses in a language in order to get access to that examination. And those are locally developed as that Regents exam went away several years ago. CTE pathway, students must successfully complete a department-approved career and tech ed program, which is 3 to 5 CTE courses, and earn a passing score on the 3-part technical assessment associated with those CTE programs. We also have a CDOS pathway, where it requires 2 CTE courses, 54 hours of work-based learning, a career plan, and an employability profile. So we still do have that CDOS pathway. Now, if students are not able to earn a passing score of 65 on their Regents exams, they also may meet eligibility for appeals, safety nets, and or a superintendent's determination. Typically, students who avail themselves of those particular options receive a state-approved local diploma instead of a Regents diploma. So that's a lot. I'll keep going. So the types of diplomas that we currently issue to students in New York State are the local diploma, the Regents, and the Regents with advanced designation, and we'll quickly go down through what those mean. The current regulations allow some flexibility in meeting the assessment requirements. They include appealing scores that are within a certain number of points of passing, low pass safety nets, which are scores as low as 45, for example, for students with disabilities, and the superintendent's determination for students with disabilities who have successfully completed all of their coursework, but who were unable to pass or even meet a safety net on one or more required assessment. All diploma types require students to earn at least 22 units of credits, because remember, we have the units of credit and the examination pathways. So everybody has to have at least 22 units of credit. Students who meet the credit requirement and use appeals, safety nets, or superintendent determination to meet the assessment requirements are typically earning a local diploma. Students who meet credit requirements and earn a passing score on all of their required assessment exams earn a Regents diploma. Students can still earn a Regents diploma by using one appeal on a Regents exam for no more than 5 points below the passing score, so in the 60 to 64 range. So you can still earn a Regents diploma and appeal one exam if you're within just those 5 points. Students who meet credit requirements earn a passing score on all of the required assessments, including 2 additional math and 1 additional science, and complete a sequence in languages other than English, the arts, or CTE can earn a Regents diploma with advanced designation. In addition to our 3 diploma types, New York State has moved towards including seals and endorsements on the diploma. And these are something that I think, at least in my experience, our students are oftentimes the most proud of. So the seals and endorsements are to acknowledge students who go above and beyond the minimum diploma requirements in certain areas that the current regulations allow for a variety of recognitions to be added to a student's diploma in the form of seals and endorsements. The technical endorsement can be added to any diploma type, local Regents or Regents with advanced designation, for any student who completes a department-approved CTE program, including the 3-part technical assessment, in addition to meeting the minimum diploma requirements. There's also a seal of biliteracy that can be added to either a Regents or Regents advanced designation diploma. And this recognizes a high level of proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing in 1 or more languages in addition to English. We have the honors endorsement, which can be added to either a Regent's diploma or an advanced designation diploma for students who score particularly well on their exams, the Regent's exams. Students who earn a computed average of 90 or above in all of their Regent's exams receive an honors endorsement. And finally, we have the advanced diploma requirements. Students who meet the advanced diploma requirements may also earn a mastery designation in either math, science, or both subjects. And that's reserved for students in mathematics or science who scored 85 or above on the 3 Regents exams in mathematics and or science. I know way back there you can't see any of this. I'm assuming that at some point we can share this slide deck with the field, so we'll make sure we check into that. So New York State has 2 existing credentials. These are not equivalent to a diploma. So these are the credentials that some of our students who are challenged the most oftentimes receive. The Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential is available to students with disabilities who are assessed using the New York State alternate assessment. And it must be accompanied by documentation of the student's skills and strengths and levels of independence in academic, career development, and foundation skills needed for post-school living, learning, and working. To earn the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential, students must have completed at least 12 years of schooling, excluding kindergarten, or the school year in which they turn 21. And the credential is conferred, not earned. There are no minimum requirements in this particular diploma, or the credential. And while there still is the Career Development and Occupational Studies Commencement Credential, CDOS, it can now be used as a pathway to a diploma or as an add to a diploma. When the credential is given as a standalone existing credential, it's not equivalent to a diploma. Students who attempt but who do not successfully complete all of the New York State diploma requirements and do not complete all of the CDOS commencement credential requirements can earn the CDOS as an exiting credential. This is an earned credential, but it is not equivalent to a diploma. So that's a very quick and broad overview of the different sorts of diplomas and requirements that are currently required of our students. Let's take a quick look at some of the thoughts from other states as we enter into our conversations this evening. Some states are modifying or adding to the number of options available to students in order to graduate from high school. States are making adjustments to their assessments required for high school graduation. States are exploring innovative approaches to high school pathways. Some of these ideas include competency-based diplomas, the use of performance-based assessments, capstone projects, and the inclusion of work-based learning or other experiential learning opportunities. So that's some food for thought there. The required number of courses in each content area varies considerably across states and districts. So, versus 2 credits or 4 credits for mathematics for example. In addition, specificity of courses, varies considerably across states in districts. So 3 credits of science versus biology, chemistry, and physics. So you have a lot more flexibility in some states. In addition, some states like New York require students to pass 1 or more assessments to graduate, while others do not. So some states don't have any assessment requirements in order to graduate. And there's some states that are somewhere in between New York State and the states who don't require anything. So for example, in some states there are assessments for accountability purposes only, but they do not have consequences for students' grades or courses. In other states, an assessment is given as a final exam and contributes from 5 to up to 30% of their students' final course grade. Some states might require a minimum score in 2 or more assessments to graduate, but a student may offset lower performance on one test with higher performance on another, for example. More recently, states are including learning and leadership experiences in their graduation requirements. The experiences include extended work-based learning, service learning, or co-curricular activity, such as participation in state and career and tech ed student organization competitions. 12 states include a co-curricular learning and leadership experience measure in their state or federal accountability systems, often part of a CCR menu. Fewer than 10 states include capstone experiences, service learning, portfolio, or similar component as part of the graduation requirements. My notes were worded as fewer than 10 states. I like to think of that as, wow, 10 states have moved in that progressive way to require just a capstone project. So that's pretty interesting food for thought. So if you want to take a look at a map of co-curricular learning and leadership experiences that are included in high school accountability systems, there's a map of the states who are currently doing that. Some states, including New York State, are adding credentials to their graduation options. So, you know, we do that with our seals. Graduation options take many forms, including endorsements, seals, pathways, and diplomas. States offer more than 115 different high school graduation options for students at this time, if you take a look at all of them. So for the class of 2019, 14 states have 3 or more graduation options. 15 states had at least two graduation options. 21 states in Washington, D.C. have 1 state-defined graduation option. So with that said, it's now time to move on to our main event. I'm going to put this down for a second and talk about why you're here this evening, because this is really the meat and potatoes of our session, is your feedback and your conversation. At this time, we're going to break into our breakout sessions, which you've already been assigned to and you're seated at your tables. And the way this is going to work is there are 5 guiding questions. And you have the materials at your table. And at your table, we've already pre-designated a facilitator and a note taker for your table. I will provide some general timekeeping up here at the podium just to keep things moving along. Each table will be starting with a different question. That way, if a table got bogged down and didn't get through all of the questions, or not bogged down, but really engaged and excited about a particular question, I'll try to be positive here. If you get excited and really engaged with one particular question, by starting at different questions at each table, we make sure that the room in total addresses all 5 questions thoroughly. So each facilitator, their task will be just to prompt the conversation. Maybe throw some additional thoughts out there to help the conversation along. And we also have a note taker at each table, because the department has been very thoughtful in putting together an online survey where we can capture your information in real time, and by the time you walk out of the door this evening, we can submit that information to the department for further consideration. So we have note takers at each table, and we have a facilitator at each table. Each question will run for approximately 12 minutes. Again, I will gently let you know we're approaching the 12-minute time period. That does not mean stop what you're doing and move on to the next question. If you're in the middle of a really exciting or thoughtful idea, we definitely do not want you to stop just because we've hit the 12-minute mark. So I'll gently remind you when we're approaching 12 minutes so you can wrap up any particular conversation at that point, and then the facilitators at each table can guide you on to the next question. So that should take us around an hour to do all 5 questions. And at that point, after the hour, your note taker will have recorded all of your thoughts and will submit the survey. But we will have one additional task after that, and that is we'd like to ask each table to do a report out. Now, you may be looking around the room saying, oh my gosh, we're going to be here all night. So we're going to have some very specific rules about this. Each table is going to, as you go through your 5 questions, I want you to be thinking about what's the really one awesome thing that came up at this table that we're excited about that we feel needs to be shared with everybody. You will then designate a spokesperson to share that one really great thought, and we will have 2 minutes per table to share each one of those amazing thoughts from each of our tables. We'll have separate people up here in the front taking notes on that, so nobody at the table has to worry about that. And that information will also be shared with the department as they move forward in their thoughts. Regent Ouderkirk is here. She'll say a few words to you at the end of the evening. And so without further delay, I think we're going to get started. We'll turn it over to each table facilitator. Again, I want to thank you on behalf of everybody here for coming. And I'll just keep time and let you know as the evening goes on. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll just, again, in an effort to keep the evening moving and to get you out of here in a reasonable amount of time, I'd like you to just, again, we're going to take an opportunity to share one powerful thought from each table. We would ask that you designate somebody. It could be your facilitator. It doesn't have to be your facilitator. Mr. Burns will be traveling around with a wireless microphone so that we can move from table to table. And again, so that we aren't here all evening, we're going to limit it to 2 minutes per table, and we'll be kind of rigid with that so that we can quickly go through all of these thoughts. But before we do any of that, I would ask that all of the folks who are helping as note takers at each table, if you feel you're ready and you've entered all of your content, go ahead and submit that form. And if you have any issues, just wave me down and I'll see if there's anything I can do. So with that said, all of the note takers submit their form. Mr. Burns will turn the microphone on and we'll move from table to table. Are our other note takers ready to go? We're ready? Okay, excellent. It's all yours, Tom.
All right, I guess I'll go first. The thing that we thought after all of our conversations stood out the most is that what we want most are good, thoughtful, knowledgeable, capable, thinking people who can apply their knowledge and skills. Some kids can pass the algebra regents, but not do the above listed items. We need to be more flexible in how students show they're ready for 2 or 4 year college, military service, or civic engagement, etc. Thanks.
Ours was much shorter. I don't know if that's good or bad. Okay. Our group was very succinct. We just said, stop teaching students how to take a test and let's just teach them how to think.
I think one of our biggest takeaways was how difficult of a task SED has in front of them. Monumental. We looked at the importance of academics, but also the importance of soft skills or essential skills, life skills, and career development.
You were awesome.
So we talked a lot about how diverse students are in general, and I'm always the guy that complains about feedback, so you know. So we talked about how diverse students were and just how the opportunity for even more pathways than there are now, and including giving the students the option of how they would like to be assessed. Knowing that students probably have a better idea than we do on their best way of conveying that they've learned something.
We talked a lot about all the different skills and competencies, including the academic ones that we would want to see in our students. And while we didn't flush it out because we talked forever, we were looking at, almost the idea of a menu of assessments where academics is only one component of it, and you can really get into and assess the other skills and attributes you'd want to see in a 21st century learner.
So our group talked about how we want more project-based learning and the essential skills that it brings with, such as networking. I'm a student, so this is pretty good networking, I think. A research aspect of doing it on your own, being more independent, and then bringing that back with your group and explaining it better for a project. and the communication skills of presenting and talking to people instead of just doing the homework and getting a grade.
We might have 1.5 things here. So we talked a lot about promoting experiences for students as they get into high school, but we also recognize that it's much more than, this is much more than just a high school issue. It's more of a pre-K through 12 issue. One of the things we did talk about, and I echoed, is one of the most difficult things to do in a school district is change a high school schedule, if anyone's ever tried to do that. And so we brainstormed on different ways, is this an opportunity for SED to take a look at the necessity of having Regents exams at all, or at least on how they're scored, and take a stand either one way or another, if we're gonna go another 100 years in this direction, or is it opportunity? And then locally, we talked, but maybe there could be incentive at SED is for students to have the opportunity at a high school to select 4 courses throughout their career, 4 of the 22 credits to take as a pass-fail. And they could take some risk and take some of those courses that they may not want to take for hurting their GPA or just trying something else. And that might be something we could do locally, but it would be nice if we had support at the state or regional level, even through a BOCES, that to give our kids an opportunity to try something a little bit out of the norm. So.
Like everyone else, we talked about everything under the sun at our table. But the one big takeaway that we had was that technology is changing our world so quickly that today is the slowest our world will change for our current students. And that will only get quicker and quicker and quicker. We have no idea what our kids will face in the future. Not a clue. So our students need to know how to learn, because they're going to need to learn to adapt to new situations. They're going to need to learn to be problem solvers. We don't know what the future will hold for them, but they need to be able to learn. So our big takeaway was students need to be able to learn once they leave us.
Our takeaway, we had multiple things that we spoke about, but it seemed to be the same underlying thing kept coming up. And the one thing our group kept bringing up was we really need 2 sets of exams if we're going to stick with an exam measure. One was the Regents, and for those students, when we talk about special population or different groups, is the RCTs that we had years ago, just because the vocabulary, the terminology, the way the exams are written, they're wrote in different manners. So that was what we said for those students, instead of keep coming up with different options and different pieces like that, is to revisit that dual exam for those students that are struggling. We spoke a lot about CTE and career exploration and business math and those soft skills of communicating with people and those interpersonal skills that our students a lot of times can do stuff on a computer, or they can work independently, but they really do not have those social interaction skills, those coping skills, those pieces of working with other people. And we spoke about that a lot, like business courses, health, home and careers. We talked about a lot of those courses that we have gotten away from, that we really need to revisit to teach kids those inner skills to be a better person. Thank you.
So just like all of you, we had fabulous conversations at our table as well. And one of the things that we talked about was the need to make learning meaningful for our students, because we hear even more and more now, how does this apply to me? I can look this up on Google. I don't have to memorize this anymore. So how do we, when we're changing, how do we change so that we continue to make their learning meaningful and relevant to the real world? And we talked about the notion of perhaps taking like our concept of CTE centers, because we're so rural here. We don't have the same experiences that kids in Rochester and Albany and New York City have, where they have magnet schools, where they can go and take courses that interest them. And so we talked about in our region, because this whole approach has to be addressed equitably across the state. It can't just fix something for one region and leave those of us up here out. So how could we offer more experiential, hands-on learning, which we lost a lot in our districts with the budget cuts and the gap elimination adjustments and all of those. We lost, I know my district lost business teachers and tech teachers and family consumer science teachers, all those courses that kids came to school and loved to take, and those aren't coming back. So how can we take the notion of perhaps a tech center or a regional high school where if you're interested in the medical field, you can go here and they partner with a hospital and you can learn phlebotomy and you can learn whether or not you want to be an RN or a PA or whatnot, or if you're really mechanical, you can go here and do this, but you're also doing project-based and you're writing papers and doing research, but it's about things that are really meaningful for our kids and will help them in the future. So that was the majority of it, but more blurring the lines between distinct subjects, having that crossover between our maths and our sciences and our English and our social studies that we see at the K-6 level and we lose at the high school. So more opportunities for that.
Okay, that's a tough act to follow for sure. We really talked about the need to make sure that we're simplifying this process so that all stakeholders involved can really understand what's going on, because what's currently happening is extremely confusing for a lot of the stakeholders in this process. We also talked again about, and most people have said this, right, making sure that there's options that align with the post-secondary goals of the kids, making sure that we are putting in measurements that accurately reflect what we're measuring, that we're measuring skills, not just an ability to take a test. So those were kind of our big, is to simplify and make sure that we're putting in place options for students that are equally valued, that not all kids are college bound, and really like career and tech ed is a great option, kids going directly into careers, all of those things should be valued equally. So thank you.
Did every table have an opportunity to go? That was the lightning round. That was excellent. Thank you. I certainly don't want to, feel like I'm shoving you out the door, but I know that, people like to keep things moving. So we are very honored, by the way, to have Regent Beverly Ouderkirk here with us this evening, and this is her region. She represents your interests when she is down at the Board of Regents meetings in Albany, and I think it's been very powerful for her to be here this evening to hear these conversations. And Bev, at this time, I'd like to invite you up, and if you just want to say a few words to the group that's here this evening.
Somebody else was coming next. Good evening. I wish I'd had the opportunity to get to every table, but I do have a preference, and in case some of you don't know what it is, it's students. And they didn't let me down again. They are so fantastic with how they contribute, their honesty, their enthusiasm, their ideas, and I get stuck with them and the time just passes by. But I have to tell you that I am so pleased with this turnout in this region. It was absolutely fantastic. Some neat ideas have come forward. I asked the students to leave their contact information with me because last week when I was at one of these sessions in the Albany region, I wanted to be able to get back to the students. One time with them is not enough. As we go through the different stages of what the next 2 years will hold for all of us, we need to revisit the topics with the young people and with educators for sure. It is just so exciting. I look around the room, there's so many of you I haven't seen in a while, because now my territory does cover even a larger area. I go from the St. Lawrence to the Mohawk, from as far west as Morristown, where I live, to the Northway. It's 11 counties, 6 BOCES regions, and 100 school districts. I've had to adjust my schedule a little bit if I want to remain upright and be able to do this. So I'm I'm reducing some of my time on the road to the extent that I can, but these kinds of events are incredible. You know, we've talked, I've been on the Board of Regents now for 5 years, nearly 5 years. We talk about a lot of things, but we never seem to get to the point of doing some of them. And this time, we need to do something with our expectations for our students and with the students. I've had a wonderful time with Tracy and her classes over the years. I've learned so much from those young people as I attended. What is that weekend coming up in March, Tracy?
Well, we're going to BOCES Lobby Day, our BOCES Advocacy Day. That's what we do that. And
Right.
That was the Hispanic Youth Leadership Conference.
It was the most fantastic thing. It was so great. I was talking to the North Country students afterwards, and they said, you know, we were sitting at the dinner table and we couldn't understand a thing the other students were saying because they were speaking in Spanish. And all of a sudden, one of them said, oh my goodness, we all speak English. We can talk to you in English. And just that realization, and last week in Albany and tonight, communication and speaking other languages has come forward. Our world is shrinking, and the ability to be willing to talk, to learn other languages, and to reach out to others is just so very important. I have made the decision, I just turned 80 a couple of months ago, I have made the decision to attempt to do another term. I doubt that I'll last for 5 years, but in the meantime, I want to be a part of the selection of a new commissioner and all the efforts that we have going in Albany. And being part of the local discussions is so important to me because I value the people that make up our school districts and the students that are a part of that. I've been so discouraged at times in the past year or so because of politics and other things, and I won't go into that part of it. But you know what always helped me? Getting into my schools, visiting with the children in their classrooms. In fact, 2 days before I ended up in the hospital in April, when I came closer to death than I want to think about, I was visiting schools. And a former student from Morristown emailed one of my sons, and she emailed a picture. The picture was taken while I was visiting Salem, small rural district in northeastern New York, and next to me was a little preschooler. And she had that look on her face that we try to get from all of our students. She was so excited because she had discovered something she could do that she didn't know she could do. She had the little weaving square. She had been making a pot holder. Some of you may remember those days. She was explaining it to me, and the brilliant photographer that was following me that day captured that little girl's face. And I kept looking at that from my hospital bed, and most every time I looked at it, it brought tears to my eyes because I thought, if I can't continue to try to make things better and improve things for all kids, life isn't worth living for me, but I need to remain strong. And when I was able to be home, I got confined for 7 months. I was not allowed to drive, which, if you know what my normal schedule is, driving is a big part of it. And I sat there looking out at the St. Lawrence River one day, and I said, I'm not quite sure that I know who's in charge of all these really big decisions. But if I was allowed to continue to live, there must be a reason. What might the reason be? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I guess somebody thought, I was a special ed teacher years ago, but I guess somebody thought I didn't understand what some of our students with special needs go through. And the day the doctors and nurses asked me my name, and I got real upset with them, and said, of course I know my name. How many times are you going to ask me that today? They asked me, and I couldn't say it. I gotta tell you, it scared the you-know-what out of me. But it just made me stronger in terms of I've got to find a way to make myself strong enough again to still do things with and for kids. Because there are so many young people, and many of you have been talking about it during the discussion of these 5 questions. There's so many young people that can't express what's in their head or what's in their heart. And they need us to continue that battle of finding ways to reach them and opening the doors and windows so they can contribute to life on this earth in positive ways. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for being here. Students, you're going to be hearing from me because I want to tap your brains some more. Some good stuff was coming out. And thank you all for including me tonight. I look forward to the major work that we have ahead of us, but it'll take us all working together. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As the final step, I'm going to provide a few closing comments. My name is Mark Davey. I'm the District Superintendent for Champlain Valley Educational Services BOCES. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful discussion, your feedback, and your time this evening. I know the Board of Regents and the department value the information that they receive from these meetings. The draft timeline is before you to refresh everyone's memory. You know that we're in phase 1 at this time, and these regional meetings will continue until April. And the feedback from these regional meetings will be compiled and presented to the Board of Regents this summer. The Blue Ribbon Commission will first convene, that's phase 2, in the fall of 2020. And they'll carry on and continue the work over the following next year. This work will include forming subgroups on many of the priority areas that everyone talked about tonight. It's expected the Commission will present its work to the Board in the winter of 2022. The Commission's work, again, is going to be completed in approximately 2 years and allow ample time for the stakeholder and public feedback to be part of this process. And I will share with you during our discussions and meetings at SED with the department, as well as attending Board of Regents meetings. The feedback that you give is listened to. It's listened to. In one of the surveys that was given earlier this year, in the past year, there were 144,000 comments across the state, 144,000. And the Board of Regents and the department sat up and listened. So you say, does this information and feedback count? It does. This was an important meeting tonight, and your time is highly valued. Now for the next slide, just a quick update. As you've seen, there is a graduation measures website. The department has made this available to provide information, and there will be ongoing updates as the review of the graduation measures moves forward. In addition, you may know some people who weren't able to attend this evening. And if not, there are other regional meetings and regional forums being held across the state until April or through April. If you know colleagues or friends or other individuals who are interested that can't make any of those meetings, there is a survey available on the website to submit feedback. And again, I can't stress enough, that feedback is important, it's reviewed, and it counts. And lastly, as a final conclusion, and that is, in the next couple of days, all of you are phenomenal participants this evening, are going to receive an email about a participant exit survey. It's estimated it's just going to take you a few minutes to fill out, and we ask that everyone who attended participate. And as a final step, I'm wondering if you can just join me in thanking some of the folks who put this together. First, we have the wonderful FEH staff under the leadership of Dale Brielle and Lori Torville. Could we please give them a round of applause? Next, I would like to thank all of our facilitators and recorders tonight. Can we please give them a big round of applause? Third, I want to thank Dr. Leslie Myers-Small, who is a new Assistant Commissioner for the State Education Department. So she's representing SED, but I can share with you, she was a colleague superintendent, although I've been in my position now 7 years, but she and I were colleague superintendents in the Monroe II BOCES, and she is a phenomenal leader, and she is going to do great things, and I want you to know that we're in great hands with leaders like Dr. Small. And lastly, and I know we gave our Regent a phenomenal applause, but we are so lucky to have a Regent who cares so deeply about our students, about all of our schools, and I will share with you the 4th Judicial District is the biggest Regents district in the state. So again, please help me thank Regent Ouderkirk for coming tonight and her comments. So, and lastly, on behalf of our 3 BOCES, and often we're referred to as the rooftop BOCES, if you haven't heard that, across the top of New York State. So we have St. Lawrence, Lewis BOCES, we have FEH BOCES, and Champlain Valley Educational Services BOCES. So please, thank you, and everyone have a great evening.